In any case, we're going to be discussing The Wasteland, one of the 20th century's great poems. It was originally written in a much longer version. Ezra Pound, to whom Eliot showed it, said that, listen, this is way too long, and got him to cut out major portions. What is left is a masterpiece. If you looked at the longer version, you would realize why Eliot dedicates this to Pound and calls him Il Miglior Fabbro, the greater craftsman. Because indeed, the longer poem isn't very impressive. There's a lot of junk that got cut out of this. And that's an important moral for you all. Be very critical about your writing and be willing to cut out junk. Even great people produce junk, and it's vastly better without it. In any case, there is T.S. Eliot at the blackboard charting out something, and we're going to be discussing a poem that begins with an epigraph. It is in foreign languages. We're going to encounter a number of different languages in this poem, and here we get two of them. Nam sibilam quidem cum ego ipse oculis meis, vidi inapula pendere et cum illi pueri dicerent, sibila tifelis respondebat illa apotheinen phelo. Translate. Good. Ego ipse oculis meis. Good. I myself with my own eyes have seen, vidi, sibilam quidem cumis, the Sibyl of Cumae, in ampula pendere, hanging in a jar, et cum illi pueri dicerent, and when the children, or the boys, said, Sibila tithelis, Sibyl, what do you want? Respondebat illa, she responded, apotheren phelo, I want to die. Now, who can tell me the story of the Sibyl? Yes?
The Cumaean Sibyl, she was the one that gave Aeneas like the golden bough so he could go in the underworld.
Good. Yes, so she has this ability to impart wisdom, which is why she's sought after and so on. But for her good deeds, she was granted a wish by the gods. And what did she wish for? Eternal life. Okay, eternal life. But she forgot to ask for eternal youth. So she cannot die, but she gets older and older and more shriveled, which is why now she's a shriveled specimen in a jar. Okay, hoping to die. She's been there for hundreds of years, her body has shriveled, she's nothing but this little husk in a little jar. Okay, and she says, I want to die. Okay, now, yes, well there's the translation. And so it's dedicated to Pound, the better craftsman, and that's a reference to Dante's Purgatorio, in which he has a poet, Guido Guinzelli, pay tribute to another poet as a better maker of poems. What we're going to find throughout this poem is, notice we've already encountered, English, Italian, actually medieval Italian, Greek and Latin. We'll encounter a number of others throughout the poem. We get a whole pastiche here, a bunch of different fragments of things, fragments of languages, fragments of quotations, references, and so on, woven together. This is one of the few poems in the English language that has extensive footnotes. And some people love it for that reason, other people hate it. I'm one of those who's like, footnotes, I love it. But anyway, you may not be like that. It starts with a section called The Burial of the Dead. April is the cruelest month. Now right away, there's something surprising here, right? April. What does April signify to you?
Rain.
Okay, good. Spring, rain, what else?
Life.
Flowers.
It starts getting really hot.
Good. Flowers, yes, in Texas, heat. What else? April Fool's Day, good. What else?
Life.
Life, yes, life. And so here it's surprising. April is the cruelest month. Actually, what he's doing here is playing off of Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales, who opens things this way. One but April with a sure suita, the drought of March hath pierced to the ruta. Okay? Or if you prefer it in a modern version, when April with his showers sweet with fruit, the drought of March has pierced to the root and bathed each vein with liquor that has power to generate therein and sire the flower. Okay, so Chaucer is playing off this thing. April, rebirth, spring, flowers, rain, warmth returns, and so on, right? It's a happy time. However, look at it again in Eliot. April is the cruelest month. Now, why is it cruel? It breeds lilacs out of the dead land. mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. That's a very different vision of the rebirth of life. Instead of, oh, flowers, spring, birds, bees, oh, instead we get, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, the memory of summer beforehand, the desire for life again, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter, cold, icy, no, winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. So it's a pretty gloomy and surprising beginning. April, is it a time of rebirth? Well, yes, but for that very reason, it is the cruelest month. Now, this poem is written just after World War I. To anybody at that time, this image of the roots beneath the earth, winter kept keeping them warm, suddenly stirred, would have given them a different sort of impression. What might it have suggested?
The winter kept keeping them warm? Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, who is kept warm by the winter?
The buried ones.
The buried ones, yes, the burial of the dead. Okay, think of those fields that stretch on for miles in northern Europe with the bodies of those who died in the war. We're talking about millions of people dead, millions of people buried not too long ago. And so the image in Eliot's mind here, and the image in the minds of his readers would have been, oh, the dead land. Yes, the cemeteries, all of those burial grounds of those who have died in the war. And yes, winter, the covering of snow, right, keeps the bodies warm, protects them. But now everything's being stirred up again. And so that's part of the image here too. Keep in mind, World War I has just ended. This poem was published in 1921, so it's only 3 years after the war. And so that's very, very fresh in everyone's mind. But now we get a pleasant image. And the poem is full of these sudden shifts of mood, sudden shifts of voice as the speaker changes gender or changes age or does something else. And so here we get something that is a very different mood. Summer surprised us, coming over the Starnberger See with a shower of rain. And this is a picture, by the way, of the lake he's talking about. We stopped in the colonnade and went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee and talked for an hour. Bin gar keiner Russen, stamm aus Litauen, Deutsch. Okay, I'm not Russian, I'm Lithuanian, I'm a real German. Okay, but now what's the mood?
Happier?
Happier, right? I mean, hey, we're out there on the shores of a beautiful lake. There's a shower of rain. We stop in, we have some coffee, we talk, and here's somebody at the next table talking about being Lithuanian. And now another pleasant recollection. And when we were children staying at the Archduke's, my cousin's, the Archduke, my cousin, okay? So now we're not just having a pleasant memory, but actually now, as you'll see, he's taking on a female voice and one of the nobility. My cousins, he took me out on a sled, and I was frightened. He said, Marie, Marie, hold on tight. And down we went. In the mountains, there you feel free. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. So what's the image here?
Exhilaration.
Well, exhilaration, but also memory, right? Remembering that this is the way it was. Remembering this pleasant past. This Europe, right? This nobility, this life that is now gone. And so part of the image here, too, in 1921 would have been, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, the old Europe, the Europe of the nobility, of the Archduke, of going and summering here and then wintering there and moving from castle to castle and playing and just having fun in the mountains. There you feel free, staying up all night if you want to because you don't have to go to work, etc. All of that is in the past, but all of that's now just a memory, okay? That Europe is dead and it's not coming back. A sudden shift in mood again. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images, where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. What's happening in this image?
Drought.
Drought. Yes, absolutely. Anything else suggested to you here?
Brokenness.
Good, broken. Notice the heap of broken images. So he's remembering that old Europe that used to exist. It's not there anymore. And now he looks around, and what does he see? He sees stony rubbish. He sees a heap of broken images. He sees a dead tree that gives no shelter. Okay? And so all of a sudden, he looks around, there's no sustenance here. Everything is gone. Yes, there were these wonderful memories. Remember when we were young and everything was great? And now, now, after the war, there's just a heap of broken images. There's another thing there that might suggest something. Son of Man, what's that all about?
People.
Well, people, yes. Does it suggest anything else to you?
Building reference? Buildings?
Buildings?
Yeah.
Why buildings?
Stony rubbish right now. I was thinking something about buildings.
Oh, that's very, I never thought of that, but actually that's very clever. You might think of the sons of men as other people, right? Or you might think of it in a biblical reference as the way Jesus referred to himself. But in this context, you might think, but just think creations of man, like buildings, like civilization, like all of those things that used to exist that are now just stony rubbish, that used to be something but are now just a heap of broken images. Those things that are our creations, our constructions have been shattered. And so excellent, the sons of men in this case might be also the creations of mankind. Now, there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. There's an illusion behind this too. What is it?
Dust and man, is that also a biblical reference?
Yes, also a biblical reference. Okay? This fear, a handful of dust, just the rock, okay, in the wilderness, nothing else. Yeah.
Are you talking about like a handful of dust, like the dead bodies of the war? So like this is what fear is, the dead from the war? Are you talking about that?
Excellent, excellent. The particular biblical verse in the background here is Ezekiel, which is, remember it in the spiritual, them bones. Okay, there's nothing but dry bones here. Well, bones, right? It's a symbol of death. Dryness, the sort of drought, the nothing but stones. The image is dead bodies in the background, okay? No life, just death, just dryness, just dead bones, okay? And so that's the handful of dust. That should also suggest dust to dust, right? From dust you come, from dust you return. Again, an image of death. And so he looks around and all he sees is death. All he sees is broken images. All he sees is collapse, destruction. Now we get, well, some more German. Frisch weht der Wind, der Heimat zu, mein irisch Kind, wo weilest du? The wind blows fresh to the homeland, my Irish girl, where are you lingering? This is a quotation from Tristan and Isolde. Okay, and so it's kind of somebody there waiting for someone. But in this case, waiting for the ship to come in, bringing the loved one back. But the ship doesn't come. Now we go back to the pleasant image. You gave me hyacinths first a year ago. They called me the hyacinth girl. Yet when we came back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet, I couldn't speak and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing looking into the heart of light, the silence. Od und leer das Meer. Okay? Empty and desolate the sea. So I'm looking there waiting. I remember, okay, when we were in the hyacinth garden, I remember when we were young and playing and full of life, and now I'm waiting for the return of that. But I look out onto the sea, I wait, the wind is fresh, and empty and desolate is the sea. Okay, I wait in vain. Life doesn't come back. And by the way, Nietzsche refers to the same passage, which I think is interesting. Now we get yet another shift. Unreal city, under the brown fog of a winter dawn. A crowd flowed over London Bridge. So many, I had not thought death had undone so many. That too is a reference. It is a reference to Dante's Inferno, where he's looking out over the Inferno and he's looking at all the dead. marching in a similar way. So he's having this vision of London and commuters going to their jobs, just being like the dead in the Inferno. Okay? And here's the image in the Inferno. Si lunga tratta di gente, ch'io non avrei mai creduto che morte tanta n'avesse disfatta, so long a train of people that I should never have believed death had undone so. Okay, so that image of thousands just walking, trudging. And he gets the same image. London now, in other words, is like Dante's hell. That's what he's telling you just after the war. Sighs, short and infrequent, were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes before his feet, flowed up the hill and down King William Street to where St. Mary Woolnoth, that's a church, kept the hours with a dead sound on the final stroke of 9. And he has a footnote that says, a phenomenon I have often observed. In other words, that there's something about that bell that isn't quite right. And when it strikes, instead of this nice resonant bong, it just kind of goes on bong. Okay, so in any case, that's the vision. Now, each man fixed his eyes before his feet. Again, this sort of mindless trudging. And it flows up and down the street. The church, okay, this remembrance, you might say, of this earlier thing is keeping the hours, but with a dead sound. Okay, in other words, that isn't vibrant either. He looks around, he sees people trudging as if dead. He sees the signs of this earlier civilization. There, but as if dead. And that also suggests this sort of, well, yeah, there was no weeping but sighs, which caused the eternal air to tremble. So there's something here that is like what Dante is describing in the Inferno. No weeping really, but just sighs, just deadness, just drudgery. There I saw one I knew and stopped him crying, Stetson! Okay, good, Stetson! What does that tell you? What does that suggest? What's a Stetson? It's a hat, right? A hat characteristic of what place?
Texas?
Texas. Okay, what does Texas symbolize?
Cowboys?
Cowboys, good. That, you know, a Stetson, what is that? I mean, come on, just, you're all too uptight.
Stubbornness.
Wait. Relax, and just let your mind associate, okay? Stetson, he's calling out to somebody, hey, Stetson, okay? Give me your impression of that person. You can't see him, right? You don't know anything about him yet, but he's called Stetson. Maybe that's his name, maybe that's his nickname. Describe this person for me.
He's from Texas.
He's from Texas. What else?
Perry.
He's from Perry. Maybe.
He's got a gun
As
on
a
his
Stetson
head.
hat.
Got a big
Stetson
iron on
hat.
his head.
Yeah, okay. He's got a Stetson hat. Maybe that's how he got the nickname. What else? Come on, be imaginative. Okay, friendly. Good. What else?
Boots on.
Sorry, somebody over here's trying to say.
Southern gentleman.
Southern gentleman. Ah, good. Civilized.
Hopeful, positive.
Hopeful. Come on. Cowboys. What are cowboys like?
Have horses?
Great boots.
Rugged.
With spurs on them.
Rebellious.
God, you guys are hopeless. I mean, maybe it's because, I mean, it's like asking fish. So, how's the water, right? I mean, the fish are like, or like this great line from, that movie from about 30 years ago, that's whose name I'm now forgetting. Fish, don't they get awfully tired of seafood? Look, they don't know anything else. And so, yeah, maybe being in the environment of Texas, you don't see it so clearly. But here he is describing the dead feeling of London after the war. And what is Texas a symbol of? It's a symbol of life. It's a symbol of energy, of masculinity, of well, and being a Southern gentleman, this idea of civilization. Texas is a symbol of life and civilization. Love it. But you who were with me at the ships at Milan. Now he's referring to an ancient battle. That corpse you planted last year in your garden. Has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year? So we go quickly from this image of happy greeting and life and energy to suddenly creepiness, right? Or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Oh, keep the dog far hence that's friend to man. Or with his nails he'll dig it up again. Disturbing image. And then it suddenly shifts again. You, hypocrite lecteur, mon zeblard, mon frère. Okay, another language, French. And this time, a quotation from Baudelaire's Flowers of Evil. Hypocrite reader, my likeness, my doppelganger, my brother. Okay? Now, what are all these references? There are a number of poems he has in mind, and hence the footnotes. He wants you to understand him. So footnotes that direct you to these various poems he's thinking about in the background. Here's one from 1612, John Webster. But keep the wolf far thence that's foe to men, for with his nails he'll dig them up again. Okay, here, again, talking about burying bodies. But keep the wolf away. It will dig these up, right? It's an enemy. But here we get the dog who might dig up the bodies, but the dog is a friend. In the background, of course, to this whole section is the religious ceremony of the burial of the dead, which goes in the English liturgy like this. It starts with, I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. But here he's looking at the body underneath, right? And he's worried about the dog digging it, a sort of hideous resurrection, not that kind of resurrection. So the juxtaposition is striking. And here too, I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself. But again, here we get the idea of this rotting corpse, instead of sprouting and so on, well, we get a disturbing image. And so, actually, I wish I could play the Handel, I know that my Redeemer liveth, for you. It's great soprano aria. Anyway, that's how the first section ends. It ends with this thought in the background. A ceremony of the burial of the dead, which would typically be like that. Don't worry, the dead are dead only temporarily. They will be resurrected. But here we close with this horrible image that maybe the dogs will dig up the bodies. Part 2, a game of chess. I'm not really going to talk about this much. It is really all about misdirected and sterile sexuality. There are images of Cleopatra, of Tereus and Philomela, someone who is turned into a nightingale. It's an extremely disturbing ancient myth that keeps popping up throughout the poem. There is a hectoring wife. There are women in the pub who are discussing something, and it turns out, you figure out by the end, they're discussing an abortion. And then you see an image of Ophelia in Hamlet. So all of these images of disturbed sexuality, of disturbed fertility, of, well, yeah, love bringing disaster, of rape, of, a marriage gone sour, of abortion, and then of Ophelia's madness. Here's just one little thing to give you the flavor of it. The wife in the pub saying to her husband, I never know what you're thinking. Think! He says, I think we're in Rat's Alley where the dead men lost their bones. More dead men. Do you know nothing? You see nothing? You remember nothing? I remember those are pearls that were his eyes.
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? First of all, what's your impression of this marriage? Right? I mean, she's annoying and he's just deeply depressed or something. But I remember those are pearls that were his eyes. Does that ring any bells? Line from the Tempest, from Shakespeare. Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones are coral made. This is again about a dead body, right? Someone who's died by drowning. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. Sea nymph sourly ring his knell, burthen ding dong. Hark, now I hear them, ding dong bell. So we again get this image of death, okay? Now, what's the point of the sterile sexuality, of the abortion, of all of that? It's really about what you might, well, it's really about the circle of life, not to go all Lion King on you, but it's about the circle of life being disrupted, right? Death not being replaced by new life. In a way, that's why April is the cruelest month. It's trying to deal with death by replacing life with new life, with fresh life. And it's not working. Something's gone deeply wrong. And so here, yes, the transformation into the resurrected body? Well, no, into something rich and strange. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Part 3 is the fire sermon. Now, there's a famous fire sermon before Eliot. And here I should tell you, Eliot's background, he was an American, though he ended up spending much of his life in England and in France. He was a student at Harvard. In fact, he was enrolled in the philosophy PhD program. He was studying Indian philosophy. And when he should have been writing his dissertation, instead he was writing The Wasteland. Let this not be, well, actually, if you're going to write something the equivalent of The Wasteland, by all means, do it. However, that was his thing, really, Indian philosophy. And we see themes from Indian philosophy come through a great deal in the rest of the poem. So here he's referring to the fire sermon. It is one of the sermons of the Buddha. There are a number of famous sermons of the Buddha. The first one, the first sermon, is one where he announces the Four Noble Truths. That life is suffering, that desire is the cause of suffering, that it is possible to eliminate desire, and you do that by way of the Eightfold Path. There's another sermon, my favorite, of the Buddha, which is called the Flower Sermon, in which, in fact, I've told pastors this should be their aim, to have a sermon as meaningful and as short as this one. The Buddha held up a flower and smiled. The end. Okay, sweet and short. But the fire sermon, he goes on and on. He says, your eyes are on fire, your ears are on fire, your taste buds, they are on fire, your organs are on fire, your body's on fire, the air is on fire, and so on and so forth. Dot, 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 everything's on fire. Okay, that's kind of the moral of the story. He could have just said, yeah, everything's on fire. You're on fire, I'm on fire, we're all on fire. In any case, on fire with what? Well, we'll find out. The river's tent is broken. The last fingers of leaf clutch and sink into the wet bank. The wind crosses the brown land unheard. The nymphs are departed. Tell me about that image. The river's tent is broken. Last fingers of leaf clutch and sink into the wet bank. The wind crosses the brown land unheard. What's the scene here? What's the image?
Expanse. It's very expansive.
Say it again.
Expansive.
Well, it is expansive. We're looking at this area, this crossing the brown land, and what's there? Nothing really. And yet, the river's tent is broken, right? The last fingers of leaf. So there are a few things there, but they're all broken. They're dead leaves. They're things like that. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. He's again referring to an earlier poem. The river bears no empty bottles, sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends, or other testimony of summer nights. The nymphs are departed. So we get this idea of the river there flowing, it's been abandoned, right? There's no sign of life around. No people, no sign that people have even been there. There's nothing there. You look, it's emptiness. Everything is unheard. And so their friends, the loitering heirs of city directors, departed, have left no addresses. Everybody's gone. By the waters of Lehmann, I sat down and wept. Lehmann is that lake in Switzerland where the pleasant scene was set earlier. But now, there's another reference. By the waters of Lehmann, I sat down and wept. Didn't any of you go to Sunday school or anything? By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. Okay, that's the reference here. And so we get, yes, by the waters of Lehmann, by the waters of this Swiss lake, I sit down and I weep when I remember what? What does he remember?
Old Europe.
Well, old Europe, yes, he's remembering the way things were. He's remembering life, right? I mean, think back, he's remembering the tent. And where do you have a tent? By a river. There's some kind of circus or party or something, right? And we're talking about summer nights where there were empty bottles, sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette, all those signs of life, of people partying, of people being at the circus or at some other big party. He's remembering that kind of life, that life where things were vibrant and people were doing things and people were there. And he's saying, it's all gone. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. Sweet Thames, run softly, for I speak not loud or long. But, another image, if my back in a cold blast, I hear the rattle of the bones, and chuckles spread from ear to ear. What is following him? What is he hearing behind him?
Gunshots.
Well, maybe gunshots. Cold blast. One could think a blast of air, right, of winter winds, but you could also think a different kind of blast.
The demon?
A blast of a gunshot, a blast of an explosion. Again, an echo of the war. The rattle of the bones, the dead again. Go ahead.
The demon? I don't know. Just
Well, and a demon, right? Who's chuckling spread from ear to ear? Yeah. Right? Sort of death, right? It's some kind of demon, something evil. So he's hearing that at his back. Well, the reference is not just to the psalm. but in part to Edmund Spencer, who is describing this scene that now tells us what he's imagining. It turns out this circus, this party, was really a bridal party. It was a wedding. Each one of us did make his bride against their bridal day, which is not long. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. So in Spencer, he's describing a wedding reception. People have gotten married, and there's a big party there by the river. Hence the tent, and hence the other signs of life. Well, what's a wedding? Yes, not just a party, but what kind of party? What is it celebrating?
New beginning.
New beginnings and the possibility of new life. Exactly. And so once again, we get this idea of, look, the circle of life trying to complete itself. Maybe these people will get married. Maybe they will have children. Maybe we'll get new life out of this. But what do we see? The excitement of the bridal day and so on? No. We see the party as having been there and no sign of it really left. All of that is gone. There's not even the trash left over from it. Another image, another allusion here. Andrew Marvell's famous poem to his coy mistress. But at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near, and yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. So in Marvell, yes, it's death chasing him. But time's winged chariot carrying that demon, it's a very different feeling. In fact, to those who know this poem, it's to his coy mistress. What is he saying?
Give up your virginity.
Yeah, give up your virginity. He's trying to say to his girlfriend, hey, come on, baby, we're not going to be here forever. Okay? So, hey, time is short. So let's get on with it. Whereas the image here is far from that. I hear the rattle of bones and chuckles spread from ear to ear. I mean, try that on your girlfriend or boyfriend. Hey, come on, right behind me, I hear bones rattling. I hear this demon. Yeah, oh yeah. So anyway, that's creepy. Now, it looks like we get nothing but death, sort of sterility. This vast emptiness. But finally we get a little bit of life. It is unfortunately a rat. A rat crept softly through the vegetation, dragging its slimy belly on the bank while I was fishing in the dull canal, on a winter evening round behind the gas house, musing upon the king my brother's wreck, and on the king my father's death before him. Here is one of the main images of the poem, actually. Something that a variety of anthropologists had written about in the couple of decades before Eliot is writing. The idea of the Fisher King. What is the Fisher King? Well, there's a legend that these anthropologists found in a number of different cultures about a Fisher King, a king who sits there fishing. Basically, the idea is this. The king who has been charged with keeping the Holy Grail has been wounded. His kingdom then turns into a wasteland. And then, well, yeah, what? The idea is something has to revive the king. Something has to revive the land. What can it be? How can you bring the king back? How can you bring the land back? Well, the whole idea in these various anthropologists is that religion is really a fertility cult. It centers around the sacrifice of a sacred king, who then is revived and enables the earth to be reborn in spring. Usually they meant this as a kind of criticism of Christianity, saying, take Christianity's main story, the story of the death and resurrection of Jesus, the Easter story, if you will, and you find that all over the place. Okay, you find that in these medieval Grail legends, yes, with a Fisher King, but you find it in a variety of other cultures too. And so their implication was, look, Christianity's just another fertility cult. Now, Eliot doesn't think that. Eliot is himself a devout Christian, hence a lot of the Christian imagery in this poem. So he doesn't think that. He thinks, nevertheless, there's a kind of deep underlying truth here. And yes, it's not just Christianity, but lots of religions are onto this deep underlying truth. Well, what is this deep underlying truth? He doesn't come out and tell us exactly yet. But the poem continues. At the violet hour, when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine waits like a taxi, throbbing, waiting. And so here we're describing finally the end of the day. Remember the beginning of the day. All those people trudging like the dead in Dante's Inferno. Now, finally, they're about to get off work. And so suddenly, they turn upward from the desk. Suddenly, the human engine has been waiting like a taxi. Okay, ready to go. In other words, work is kind of like death. It is part of the background of this poem. But now, yet another figure. I, Tiresias, though blind, throbbing between two lives, old man with wrinkled female breasts, can see at the violet hour the evening hour that strives homeward and brings the sailor home from the sea. Tiresias. What is the myth of Tiresias? Why is he an old man, but with breasts?
He was the prophet that flipped from a woman to a man due to
Good.
to a woman due to Athena cursing him or something.
Yes, okay, good, yes. Zeus and Hera are having an argument about whether sex is better for men or for women. And they say, well, nobody can really settle this argument because nobody's experienced both, right? Actually, now that we have people who are transgendered, I guess we can say we could put it to an empirical test. But at that time, that wasn't a thing. And so what happens? They say, well, Tiresias. We'll take this man, Tiresias, we'll turn him into a woman, let him experience sex from both sides, and then we'll say, so Tiresias, how was it? Okay. And so he does this, and basically he comes back with his answer, which is that it's better for women. And the gods, instead of this settling the argument, the gods get angry. Okay, and so he ends up suffering, and here he is old, having undergone this and been abandoned by the gods. But nevertheless, he's had this experience. And so you might say, all right, we're back to this theme of sexuality, of the cycle of life, of, well, sterility or fertility. And so Eliot describes Tiresias here as not just the side thing, but he says, in a way, what he sees is the substance of the poem. So we're now getting to the heart of what Eliot thinks this is really all about. He's just a spectator, he's not really a character, but still he's the most important personage in the poem. He unites all the rest. Well, what does he see? Here's how the section ends. To Carthage then I came, burning, 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 burning. O Lord, thou pluckest me out, O Lord, thou pluckest burning. Every time you get close, right? Every time you think, here's the heart of the poem, then you get something even more puzzling. But remember, this section is called the fire sermon. And here we have burning, burning, burning. But what is burning? Well, here is the fire sermon. All things, O priests, are on fire, and with what are these things? And what are these things that are on fire? The eye, see, he wasn't joking. The eye, the forms of the eye, blah, 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 blah. All that's on fire. And with what are they on fire? With the fire of passion, say I, with the fire of hatred, with the fire of infatuation, with birth, old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, misery, grief, and despair, they are on fire. So the image in the Buddha, and here it might be helpful to know the story of the Buddha. The Buddha was brought up in a palace as a prince, and his father, the king, was concerned that he never experienced anything unpleasant. He had a sort of, there had been a prophecy that his son would turn out to be a great religious leader. And the king thought, no, I want him to be king like me. I don't want him to flake out and do that. And so he tries to hide from him anything that might provoke some sort of religious thought. So anyone who's sick has to get away so the prince doesn't see, right? Death, no way. He can't see death. He can't see anything unpleasant. But then the Buddha actually goes for a ride out of the palace, and one time he sees an old person. He realizes people get old. He sees at another time a dead body. He sees someone who is ill at another time. He sees these afflictions. And so he realizes, wait a minute, life isn't what I thought. Life is concerned with things like old age, illness, death, sorrow. And he ends up concluding that desire is the root of all that suffering. So desire is what he seeks to get rid of. And so the goal is to become free of desire, free from that burning. Oh, I thought I had it here, but I guess I don't. There's another image here too. To Carthage then I came. Who comes to Carthage? St. Augustine, with a similar kind of message. Now, death by water. Phlebas, the Phoenician. Reference here is to Plato's Philebus, who is somebody who argues that the good is pleasure. That's all there is to life. Pleasure. Just go for as much pleasure as you can. But here, Phlebas the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls, and the deep sea swelled, and the prophet in laws. A current under the sea picked his bones in whispers. As he rose and fell, he passes the stages of his age and youth, entering the whirlpool. Gentile or Jew, O you who turn the wheel and look windward, consider Phlebas, who was once handsome and tall as you. In other words, a life devoted to pleasure, to satisfying desire, it's a losing proposition. In the end, you can't do it. In the end, you get old. In the end, you get sick. In the end, you die. Life, if you think of it that way, is a losing game. It is inevitably a tragedy. And so this is a sort of criticism, if you will, of a life devoted to the satisfaction of desire. Now we get to the last section, what the thunder said. And what does the thunder say? It says, da, da, da. This is part of what inspires a whole movement, da, da. But for now, he who was living is now dead. We who are living are now dying. Who are those hooded hordes swarming over endless plains, stumbling in cracked earth, ringed by the flat horizon only? What is this city over the mountains? Cracks and reforms and bursts in the violet air. Falling towers, Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London. Unreal. So we return to the unreal city, to the destruction. But where are these falling towers? Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London. What do those cities have in common? What are they symbolizing? Civilization, exactly right. Jerusalem, okay, the center of a certain civilization. Athens, of another, Greek civilization. Alexandria, of, you might say, late classical civilization in Egypt. Vienna, of Europe, of the, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. Of London, of the 19th century and the early 20th century, the center of civilization. So basically he's going through saying, look at what the centers were of Western civilization. Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London. Unreal, okay? The towers have fallen. Those civilizations are now in the past. Now notice, in London he's writing this. London is still thinking of itself as the center of the British Empire, still the most powerful country on earth. But Eliot, an American, perhaps sees more clearly than the British do at this point. Not for much longer. The tower is falling, okay? You guys aren't going to be the center of the universe for much longer. In fact, he sees the British Empire is already in decline. In this decayed hole among the mountains, in the faint moonlight, the grass is singing over the tumbled graves. Graves, again, this image of death. About the chapel, there is the empty chapel, only the wind's home. It has no windows, and the door swings. Dry bones can harm no one. So again, we get this image of death, sterility, dry bones. But then, only a cock stood on the roof tree. Cocorico, cocorico. In a flash of lightning. Then a damp gust bringing rain. So for the first time in the poem, really, we see an image of something that holds some promise for the future. Okay, here we are in this land of dry bones, drought, remembering what was, remembering life, but finding around us only sterility, only an attempt at renewing the cycle of life that is failing. And suddenly we get a damp gust bringing rain. So suddenly there's a glimmer of hope. I sat upon the shore, so now we return to the Fisher King. I sat upon the shore fishing, with an arid plain behind me. Shall I at least set my lands in order? London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. Now, poi scasose nel foco che gli fina. What's the reference to in Dante here? Now I pray you that by that virtue that guides you to the top of the stair, be mindful in time of my suffering. Then he hid himself in the fire that refines. And that's what he's quoting here. He hid himself in the fire that refines. We again get a biblical image. The fire that refines, the idea is, all right, we've had to go through this destruction, but maybe out of that destruction we can refine something that we can use to reconstruct civilization. And so we start to get a little glimpse of hope. Quando fiam Helidon, when shall I be as the swallow? Okay, in other words, the maid of Tereus sings under the poplar shade, so you would think musical trills of love came from her mouth, and not a sister's complaint of a barbarous husband. She sings, we are silent. When will my spring come? When shall I be as the swallow, that I may cease to be silent? So Eliot is saying, yes, when will our spring come? When can we actually start renewing civilization? Right now we're in a situation where all we see are a heap of broken images. So, he continues, yes, Le Prince d'Aquitaine à la tour abolie. Prince of Aquitaine to the ruined tower. Sounds like Target. Prince of Aquitaine to the ruined tower. Okay. Anyway, these fragments have I shored against my ruins. Why then I'll thick you. Hieronymo's mad again. Data. Yadvam Damyata Shanti Shanti Shanti. And the poem ends. Now, first question I have for you. Why are there all these languages, all these allusions, all these references to little bits of literature, to Dante, to the Upanishads, to the sermons of the Buddha, to various poems in the British tradition especially, to the Bible, to all sorts of things? What's all that about? What is he doing? Yeah.
Civilization up to that point.
Good. What he's got are these elements, these strands from civilization up to that point, right? He's not really just trying to impress you with his wide reading and his learning and his ability with languages. He is saying, here are fragments of our civilization. Here's the heap of broken images. Here are some of the images, okay? I'm going around and I'm finding these fragments of civilization. And our job is to put them back together. Yeah.
It shows that it all comes together in a way that no matter like what we look at, it all's going to come together to this one idea.
Good. It has to come back to one idea. Hence the fire that refines. We have to take up these fragments. And it's not really a question of putting the pots and the stained glass and so on back together. It's a question of refining out of them something important. Something that we can use for the basis of the reconstruction of this civilization. And the key to it is what the thunder says. What does it say? Well, as I mentioned, da, da, da. And at the end of the poem, he gives you the idea of what that means. Data, diadvam damyata. We get another language, Sanskrit. And so here is the reference. Okay, this is from the, why do I have to say this? Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The threefold descendants of Pragapati, gods, men, and asuras, dwelt, well, blah, blah, blah. The god said, tell us something, sir. He told them the syllable, da. Then he said, did you understand? They said, we did understand. You told us damyata. Be subdued. Yes, he says, you've understood. But then some other people come to him, the men, and say, tell us something. He tells them the same syllable, da. He said, did you understand? They say, we did understand. You told us data, give. He says, you've understood. Then the Asura said to him, tell us something, sir. He told them the same syllable, da. Then he said, did you understand? They said, we did. You told us dayadva. Be merciful. Yes, you've understood. And so that's what the voice of thunder says. Da, da, da in the Upanishad. Be subdued, give, be merciful. Let that triad be taught, subduing, giving, and mercy. And that really is what Eliot gives us at the end. So what do we get out of all these fragments of the civilization? Really, it's kind of a back to basics idea. He's saying, go back to the roots of our civilization. What are the roots of our civilization? Well, think about English, Italian, German, French. Let's see, what other languages have we seen here? Latin, Greek. They all go back to a common core language, which is what?
Indo-European.
Indo-European. Indo-European. You guys don't know about Indo-European? All Indo-European languages came ultimately from Indo-European, or so the hypothesis goes. I wrote a paper on this as a senior in high school. Gosh. Anyway, that's what he's referring to. He's saying, go back. What is the closest thing we have to that? Sanskrit. What are the oldest texts we have in our Western civilization? The Upanishads, the Rig Veda from India. And so he's saying, let's go back to the basics, to the origins. What was taught then? Self-control, giving, mercy. He says, let's go back to that. That was the ultimate root of our civilization. Maybe it's still alive. Maybe we can use these fragments of civilization to help bring it back to life.